The hum of the engines was a familiar drone, a low thrum against the soles of his feet that had become a constant in President Samuel Pierce's life. He stood by the window of Air Force One, looking down at the patchwork quilt of Midwestern farms, a vast expanse of green and gold that spoke of peace and plenty. His chief of staff, David Vance, whose face seemed permanently etched with the weight of global anxieties, moved to his side. Still nothing from NORAD, Mr. President? Vance's voice was tight. Pierce shook his head. Just static. And the satellite feeds are gone too. It's like the world just unplugged. Hours earlier, the White House had reported unusual atmospheric disturbances. Then communication systems began to fail. First intermittently, then completely. Air Force One, designed to be a bastion of command, was now a metal shell, cut off from the nation it was meant to protect. The silence from the ground was the most unnerving part. No news report, no frantic calls from governors, no military dispatches, just silence. Then the light of a small town flickered, then extinguished, one by one, like candles blown out by an unseen hand. A chill, colder than the cabin's conditioned air, crept up Pierce's spine. This was not a power grid failure. This was something else. Dr. Elias Vance, David's younger brother, traced a complex diagram on the whiteboard, his movements precise and economical. His office at the National Institute of Theoretical Physics was usually a sanctuary of abstract thought, but today it felt like a cage. The emergency broadcast system had been cycling a pre-recorded message for the past hour. Maintain calm, stay indoors, further instructions will follow. The message itself was a lie. There would be no further instructions. The many world interpretations, Elias began, turning to the small group gathered around his desk. His voice, usually calm and academic, had an edge of urgency. It posits that for every quantum measurement or event, the universe branches into multiple parallel realities, each representing a different outcome. He tapped the whiteboard, imagining a universe where a single subatomic particle takes a different spin. That minor deviation cascades, creating a distinct reality. If you extend this to all possibilities, you have an infinite number of universes existing concurrently. What if, for instance, a universe depleted of its own resources discovered a way to access others? He paused, letting the idea settle. We have observed anomalous energy signatures, faint but persistent for years. They've been dismissed as cosmic background noise, instrument errors, but what if they were attempts to establish a bridge, to find a way in? The room was silent. Outside, the sirens began, a distant, mournful wail that grew louder, steadily louder. The sudden jolt threw Pierce against the bulkhead. The aircraft shuddered violently, alarms blaring, smoke billowing from the rear of the cabin. "Engine 2 is out," a voice shouted over the intercom. "We're losing altitude." Pierce gripped the armrest, his eyes scanning the faces of his staff. Panic was beginning to set in. He saw Vance struggling to secure a flailing aid. "Brace for impact!" The world outside the window spun into a blur of gray clouds and the distorted greens on the ground rushing up. The last thing Pierce heard before the impact was the piercing shriek of tearing metal. The crash site was a twisted sculpture of fire and wreckage, smoke curling into the bruising twilight sky. President Pierce awoke to the metal tang of blood in his mouth and the acrid smell of burning jet fuel. His head throbbed. He was upside down, strapped into a seat, the cabin floor of the ceiling of jagged metal. Groaning, he unbuckled himself, falling into the debris-strewn floor. He crawled through the wreckage, calling out names. He found Vance, slumped against a mangled bulkhead, eyes wide and unseeing. A shard of metal protruded from his chest. Pierce reached for his hand, but it was cold. Alone in the wreckage, surrounded by the dead, a new silence descended. It was not the silence of disconnected communication, but the silence of absence, of a world emptied. He pulled himself out of the fuselage, staggering into the open field. The air was thick with ash. The trees bordering the field were skeletal, their leaves withered and brown as if autumn had struck with the force of a hammer. He saw no other survivors, no emergency crews. Then he saw them, figures moving in the distance, indistinct from the haze. They were too tall, too gaunt, their movement too fluid, too wrong. They moved with a predatory grace, like hunters. A cold dread seeped into Pierce's bones. This was not a rescue. Days later, Pierce, haggard and hungry, stumbled upon a derelict gas station. Its windows were smashed, the pumps ripped from the ground. Inside, the shelves were bare. The silence was absolute. Only by the rasp of his own breathing, he found a map, faded and brittle. He had heard whispers, before the crash, of remote communities, of survivalists, of places where the old ways still held. It was a desperate hope, and it was all he had. He had walked for what felt like weeks, scavenging what he could. The cities he passed were tombs, silent and still, buildings standing like hollow mountains to a vanquished population. The air itself seemed different, heavy and still. The trees were decaying at an accelerating rate, and the few animals he saw were diseased, their hair patchy, their movement erratic. The biological agent, he realized, was still at work, transforming the very fabric of the world. The figures he had seen that first night reappeared sometimes, always at a distance, always observing. They were never close enough to see clearly, but their presence was a constant, chilling reminder that he was not alone, and he was not free. One evening, he sought shelter in a small abandoned church. The pews were overturned, the altar defaced. He huddled in a corner, trying to warm himself against the encroaching chill. As he drifted in and out of sleep, images of Elias, his brother, flashed in his mind. Elias, with his theories of parallel universes, his warnings that had been dismissed as eccentric academic ramblings, seeing it as a harmless intellectual exercise. Now, he wondered if it was the key to understanding the nightmare he was living. The resistance camp was a collection of tents and makeshift shelters, hidden deep within a canyon, its entrance cleverly disguised by rockfalls and dense foliage. Pierce found it by accident, following a thin trail of smoke that seemed to defy the overall stillness of the land. He approached cautiously, a broken shovel his only weapon. A figure emerged from the shadow, a woman with a rifle held loosely in her hand. Her face was stern, her eyes wary, worn-out combat boots and a faded military jacket. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low and even. "Pierce," he rasped, his throat raw. "Samuel Pierce." She studied him for a moment, then her eyes widened slightly. "The president?" He nodded, or what's left of him. She lowered her rifle, though her gaze remained sharp. "Follow me." She led him into the camp. It was a small community, perhaps 50 people. They were mostly young, their faces hardened by the hardship, but their eyes held a spark of defiance. He saw a few elders, their face lined with wisdom, moving with quiet purpose. A woman introduced herself as Kira. She was a former Marine, her leadership evident in the quiet efficiency of the camp. She led him to a central fire where a group of people sat. Among them, Pierce saw a man whose face was instantly recognizable, even with the lines of stress etched deep into his eyes. Elias Vance looked up, his face pale, but a flicker of recognition, surprise. "Samuel? I thought you were gone." They embraced, a brief, desperate hug. It was the first human contact Pierce had had since the crash, and it brought an unexpected wave of emotion. "How are you here?" Elias asked. Pierce explained his survival, the endless walk, the ghost cities. He spoke of the strange figures he had seen. Elias listened, his expression grim. "They're called the Harvesters," he said, his voice low, "from the second Earth." He then explained what had happened. The biological agent, they call it the Great Thinning. It was engineered to target specific genetic markers, leaving a small percentage of the population unharmed. These are the ones they intend to use as a workforce for the resource extraction. He looked around the camp. "We're among the immune, Samuel. The chosen few, or perhaps the damned few." Over the next few days, Elias explained his research to Pierce and the camp's leaders. He spoke of the multiverse theory no longer as an abstract concept, but as a chilling reality. "My research, combined with fragmented data we've managed to recover, indicates that our universe is rich with a specific isotope, Exonium-17, that is rare or depleted in their universe," Elias stated, addressing a small council in the main tent. A map of the known world, crudely drawn on a canvas, was spread on the table. The Harvesters, in their reality, face an energy crisis of catastrophic proportions. Exonium-17 is their solution. They discovered a way to create a stable, interdimensional portal. This wasn't their first attempt to cross over. Kira interjected. "You mentioned that before, Elias. What do you mean, not their first time?" Elias nodded. "Approximately 500 years ago, according to our historical record, and what we've pieced together from their recovered technology, they attempted a similar invasion. They didn't have the biological agent then. Their strategy was brute force. He paused, a shadow passing over his face. They landed on the North American continent. They encountered the indigenous people here. Pierce leaned forward. The Native Americans? Yes, Elias confirmed. Specifically the tribe that occupied these very lands. They possessed a deep understanding of natural cycles, the spiritual world, and we, in our modern technological arrogance, have lost or dismissed. They perceived the harvesters not as invaders from another world, but as a corruption, a disruption in the natural order. He continued, the harvesters, despite their advanced weaponry, were vulnerable. Their technology, while powerful, was dependent on an energy source that behaved erratically. The indigenous people, through a combination of their knowledge of the land, unconventional warfare, and perhaps something more profound, something spiritual, were able to repel them. So they're learning from their mistakes. Precisely, Elias said. And they've replaced key personnel within our government, our military, our scientific institutions. They inserted their own agents, individuals surgically altered to resemble ours, acting as sleeper cells, preparing the way for the great thinning. Pierce's mind reeled. The odd behavior of some of his advisors in the week leading up to the attack, the sudden shifts in policies, the inexplicable security breaches. It all made a terrible, sickening sense. How do we fight them? Kira asked, her voice calm but resolute. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and they have the element of surprise. The key, Elias said, picking up a crude map of the region, lies in what happened before. The Native American tribes didn't just repel the harvesters. They understood something fundamental about the nature of the breach, the weakness of the portal. There are legends passed down through generations of Starwalkers, shadow people, who came from beyond the veil, and there are specific sites, sacred places, that are said to hold power. He pointed to a cluster of peaks on the map. This is where the last known major confrontation took place. There are still communities of indigenous people living in these mountains, isolated and untouched by the modern world. They might hold the knowledge we need. They might be the only ones who truly understand how to close the gate. Their journey to the mountain tribes was arduous. Pierce, Kira, Elias, and a small band of hand-picked teams set out. They moved under the cover of night, avoiding roads, sticking to the dense forests. The world outside the camp was a desolate landscape, a testament to the biological agent's efficiency. The air was often still, broken only by the mournful call of mutilated animals, their forms grotesque and unsettling. The silence of the human world, the absence of laughter, of traffic, of everyday noise, was a constant, unsettling presence. They encountered a harvester patrol one evening, their movement unnaturally silent as they stalked through a field of decaying crops. The harvesters were tall, their limbs slender, their faces obscured by metallic masks that reflected the fading light. Their bodies were covered in a type of adaptive camouflage that shifted with the environment, making them almost invisible against the backdrop of the dying landscape. Their attention focused on a distant cluster of lights, a small surviving homestead. Pierce felt a cold dread. These were not just soldiers. The way they moved, the quiet efficiency of their patrol, suggested a practiced, methodological approach to their grim task. Elias explained that the harvesters were not truly alien in the sense of coming from a different galaxy. They are human, Samuel, but a divergent evolutionary branch from a universe that developed differently. Their world faced a similar resource depletion problem millennia ago, but instead of finding sustainable solutions, they turned outward, seeking new worlds to exploit. Their culture is built on efficiency, on resource acquisition, on the systematic dismantling of other realities. He continued, while devastating, is not perfect. It seeks to leave a viable population, not destroy it entirely. They need us, or at least a small portion of us, to do their bidding. The remaining immune are seen as a valuable replicating resource. The thought of being a slave, a tool in the hands of these cold, calculating beings, was a horror that transcended physical pain. They spent hours hiding, waiting for the patrol to pass. The tension was a living thing, a cold knot in Pierce's stomach. When the last harvesters disappeared over the horizon, Kira finally signaled for them to move. They're systematic, she murmured, her voice tight. They don't just kill, they harvest everything. After weeks of travel, they finally reached the territory of the Sky Dwellers. nestled deep within the vastness of the American Southwest. The landscape was dark, beautiful, and unforgiving. Here, the air felt cleaner, the trees greener, as if their biological agent had less hold. They were met by an elder, a woman named Spirit Weaver, her face a map of ancient wisdom, her eyes piercing and intelligent. She wore traditional clothing, and her silver hair was braided with turquoise beads. Her presence radiated a quiet strength. Elias explained their predicament, the invasion, the biological agent, the harvesters. He spoke of the previous invasion and the role of the ancestors. Spirit Weaver listened, her expression unreadable. When Elias finished, she spoke, her voice low like the wind through the canyons. The Sky Dwellers have always known of the Shadow Walkers, she said. They have come from a place where the sun does not shine fully, where the balance is broken. Our ancestors faced them with spirit. They sought to steal the life breath from our world. She explained their history, passed down through the generations, of the first encounters with the harvesters. They were beings of great knowledge, but no wisdom. They knew how to tear the fabric of reality, but not how to mend it. The balance and harmony in all things saw their weakness. They exploited the instability of their passage, the very energy they used to bridge worlds. Our ancestors, with the aid of spirit guides, disrupted their entry. The harvesters' technology, designed for their own reality, was corrupted by the very essence of ours. The Exonium-17, as your scientists call it, is not just a fuel, it's a resonant frequency. Our ancestors learned to manipulate this resonance to turn their own power against them. Elias, his eyes gleaming with intellectual fervor, began to ask technical questions, attempting to translate Spirit Weaver's spiritual explanations into scientific terms. She answered with patience, speaking of vibrational frequencies, of interconnectedness, of the inherent energy in all living things. They did not merely close a portal, Spirit Weaver explained. They fractured it. They made it unstable. The harvesters have been trying to repair that fracture for centuries, to find a stable entry point. This time, they chose a more stable approach, a slow kill, not to alert the world's defenders until it was too late. She revealed that the key lay in specific ceremonies and chants, combined with certain natural crystals found only in these mountains, which could amplify and direct the Earth's natural and resonant frequencies. These frequencies, she explained, could disrupt the harvester's interdimensional technology, not destroy it, but make it unstable. The plan was audacious and terrifying. They would target the main portal, located according to Elias's recovered data and Spirit Weaver's ancestral knowledge. Beneath a major population center, the harvesters intended to make their primary resource extraction hub. The city was now a skeletal monument to the dead, but it pulsed with their eerie energy. The goal was not to destroy the harvesters, but to make this reality uninhabitable for them, to sever their connection, to turn their own portal against them. Pierce, using his knowledge of military strategy and Elias's understanding of the harvesters' technology, worked to formulate a coordinated attack. Kira would lead a diversionary force to draw harvester patrols away from the primary portal site. Pierce would lead a small team, including Elias and Spirit Weaver, to the portal itself. The remaining members of the resistance, augmented by a few other small, scattered groups who had joined them along the way, would spread out, creating localized disruptions using smaller crystals and chants to create chaos and further destabilize the harvesters' communication network. We are not fighting a war of attrition, Pierce explained to the assembled fighters. We are fighting a war of resonance. We are fighting to make our home unlivable for them, to send them back to their dying world. The city was a graveyard. The wind whistled through shattered skyscrapers, carrying the scent of decay. The harvesters had set up massive, hitting structures around what Elias identified as the primary portal nexus. Their structures hummed with an unnatural energy, pulling at the very fabric of the air. Kira's diversionary attack was swift and brutal. Explosions rippled through the ruins, drawing harvester patrols like moths to a flame. Pierce's team, moving like ghosts, slipped through the shadowed streets, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. They reached the central plaza where the Nexus portal was located. It was a massive, shimmering disk of distorted light held aloft by three colossal tripod-like structures. Harvester engineers, their masks glinting in the pale light, moved with practiced efficiency around it, overseeing the flow of Exonium-17. Spirit Weaver began to chant, her voice low and melodic. weaving ancient words that seemed to resonate with the very stone of the city. She held a cluster of glowing crystals, their facets catching the eerie light from the portal. Elias, at her side, adjusted a portal device he had jury-rigged, a frequency modulator designed to amplify the crystal's output and fine-tune it to the Harvester's technology. Their technology relies on a precise harmonic frequency to maintain the portal's stability, Elias explained, his voice strained. Spirit Weaver's chants, combined with the crystals, are generating an anti-frequency, a discordant resonance that will disrupt it. It's like hitting a tuning fork with a different note. It will shatter. The Harvesters noticed them. Alarms blared, their hushed, alien sounds echoing through the empty city. Harvester guards, tall and swift, moved to intercept them. Pierce, armed with a scavenged assault rifle, opened fire. His years of training kicked in. The instinct to protect, to lead. The combat was brutal, swift. The Harvesters were strong, but their movements, while efficient, lacked the chaotic unpredictability of desperate humans. One Harvester, taller than the rest, its mask glinting ominously, lunged at Spirit Weaver. Pierce fired, but the creature was fast, deflecting the shot with an arm guard. Just as it reached for his makeshift spear tipped with a shard of crystal, he plunged it into the Harvester's exposed neck, a precise, lethal strike. The Harvester spasmed, its movements jerky, then collapsed. Its body flickered as if it were struggling to remain in this reality. Spirit Weaver continued her chant, her voice growing stronger, more resonant. The crystals in her hand glowed brighter, pulsing with an inner light. Elias adjusted the modulator, his brow furrowed in concentration. The portal began to flicker. Its shimmering surface rippled like a disturbed water. The colossal structures supporting it groaned, sparks flying from their joints. Harvester engineers scrambled, their movements became frantic, attempting to stabilize it. Their calm efficiency was breaking down. Then a high-pitched whine began to emanate from the portal, growing louder, more unbearable. The ground vibrated. The very air around them crackled. "It's working," Elias shouted over the growing din. "The resonance is destabilizing the quantum field. They can't hold it." Harvesters, caught in the escalating feedback, stumbled, some collapsing, their bodies vibrating uncontrollably. Their masks seemed to distort. Their forms flickered in and out of existence. The portal's light intensified, becoming blinding. Pierce kept firing, pushing back the remaining Harvester guards, creating a protective perimeter around Spirit Weaver and Elias. He could feel the raw power of the energy, a force that threatened to tear him apart. Spirit Weaver's chants reached a crescendo, a powerful, guttural cry that seemed to rip through the air itself. The crystals exploded in her hands, showering them in brilliant light. Elias's modulator shrieked, then went dead. The portal shivered, convulsed, and then with a sound like a million panes of glass, shattered at once, imploded. The light vanished, leaving behind only a gaping void, a tear in the fabric of space that shimmered with residual energy, like the heat haze on a desert road. A powerful shockwave erupted from the void, throwing Pierce and his team backward. The colossal Harvester structures buckled, then toppled, crashing to the ground in a cacophony of twisted metal and grinding stone. When the dust settled, the silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. The Harvesters who remained were disoriented, their movements erratic. The connection was severed. They were stranded, cut off from their own reality. Pierce, slowly pushing himself up, his body aching, he looked at the gaping void where the portal had been. It was not gone, not truly. It was still there, but now it was a wound, hemorrhaging energy, an unstable, impassable barrier. No one could cross it. Their aftermath was not a victory celebration. It was a somber reckoning. The surviving Harvesters, disoriented and without their connection to Terra Secundus, eventually succumbed to the biological agent that still lingered in the air, or were hunted down by the remaining human resistance. There was no joy in their demise, only a grim satisfaction that the immediate threat was over. The world was still broken. The vast majority of humanity was gone. The cities were empty husks. Pierce, standing by a roaring campfire with Kira and Elias, looked out at the stars, now impossibly bright in the clear, unpolluted night sky. "We send them back," Pierce said, his voice flat. "But at what costs?" Elias, his face illuminated by the fire, responded, "The cost was immense, Samuel, but we endured. We learned that the universe is far more complex than our science imagined. That ancient wisdom holds truth we discarded." Spirit Weaver joined them, her movements silent. "The balance had been disrupted," she said, her gaze on the void where the portal once pulsed. "But the world will heal. The life breath will return." She looked at Pierce. "Your people. You had forgotten the great harmony. The Shadow Walkers saw that imbalance and sought to exploit it. But our ancestors knew. They understood that all things are connected and that power, truly understood, comes not from domination, but from harmony." Kira, ever practical, spoke. "We survived. Now we rebuild. It won't be easy, but there is still a handful of people in a vast, empty world." Pierce nodded. The challenge was immense. They were no longer fighting an invasion, but a struggle for survival, for the very future of humanity on Terra Prime. But this time, they had a new understanding. They knew that the universe was interconnected and vulnerable, and they, the survivors, the immune, were now its custodians. The final image of the void, still shimmering in the distant city, a constant reminder of what had been and what still might be. It was a wound, but also a barrier. And in the face of this broken world, there was a fragile, resilient hope. The fear remained, the knowledge that beyond the shattered other worlds existed, other threats that might one day emerge. But now they also knew they had the key to their own defense, a forgotten wisdom woven into the very fabric of the world.